In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to build the ultimate high-end all-AMD gaming PC build. A system that goes fully team red for awesome 1440p and 4K gaming performance, that looks amazing with an angular industrial aesthetic and some cool looking components, and of course it's going to come in at a price that, while not exactly cheap, represents pretty good value for money for the kind of performance on offer. Let's do this. Save big with ASUS's latest ProArt cashback campaign. Receive up to £650 of cashback when you buy an eligible ProArt product or custom PC powered by ASUS. The promotion period runs until the 3rd of August, and you even get a free 3-month Adobe subscription with eligible purchases. Head to the link below to see the full list of eligible products and to buy from a participating retailer. Now I'm going to start off, as always, by talking about the CPU and GPU combo. Why? Because, well, I recently made a video about this, but it's the two most important components in any build, and getting this pairing right is super important. Now for today's system, I've obviously gone for the highest end AMD GPU and highest end AMD CPU that I can. Now the CPU is of course the AMD Ryzen 7 9800X3D, a chip that actually represents extraordinary value for money if you're only looking for a build for gaming. Now that's not to say that this CPU doesn't have some extra multi-core qualities, it does, but with 8 cores and 16 threads, it won't be setting any world records for editing, streaming or rendering. For gaming though, it's got everything we need and tops the charts when tested against every other CPU right now from AMD and of course Intel. I'll be pairing it up with the RX 9070 XT, which is actually a fairly good budget 4K GPU. Now I use the word budget carefully, this isn't cheap. You're looking at MSRP $600, more realistically about $700 or so. I'll link latest pricing and availability down below as always. Now this particular model is the ASUS TUF design, and I really like what ASUS have done here. I think some of their Radeon 9000 and RTX 50 series GPUs are just such a nice design and perform well in terms of thermals as well. Now taking a look at some performance graphs, and we can see the 9070 XT does lag behind the 5070 Ti, but it does so for a much cheaper MSRP. And AMD's ray tracing and FSR isn't as good as Nvidia's ray tracing and their equivalent DLSS technology, but they are catching up. And of course, this graphics card has the advantage of 16 gigs of VRAM, which is really important for 4K gaming, especially as we move into the future where games are liking more and more memory. Talking of memory, but the different kind of, it's kind of the same. Let's talk about the RAM, the DRAM within the system. I've gone for a 32GB kit of G.Skill's Trident Z5 Neo RGB. This kit is it just looks cool, right? Like that's the thing, and it performs really well. As you can see, we've got this lovely black heat spreader with an RGB strip up top, and the bit that makes this memory kind of, I want to say kind of famous or easily recognizable, is this cool split design on the top of the heat spreader. It's really something different, and I think it looks pretty classy while also giving us that key gamer aesthetic. Storage-wise, I've gone a little high-end, and I'm going to explain why. I've gone for the Samsung 9100 Pro. Now this is the 4TB. I'll be linking the 2TB below. This is really expensive, but I wanted the extra storage today. The reason I've gone for it is because this build is about high end. It's about seeing what the best experience we can get from the 9070 XT is. And with these Gen 5 NVMe's getting a little cheaper every day, the 9100 Pro makes a whole lot of sense. Now, if you want to save some money, you could drop down to a last gen 990 or 980 Pro to keep it Samsung, or you could go for the Lexar NM790 for something a little cheaper. We use the 790 in loads of builds over on GeekaPC, which is our UK pre-building company. So if you've not heard of it, you can check it out below and buy builds similar to this, as you've seen on the channel, and have them delivered in a few days. I'm actually it's been a lot of work behind the scenes, and I'm really rather proud of it. Now, talking about exciting things, the cooler. And now I'm gonna say, I've never seen a cooler in a box like this in my entire life. This right here comes in from a brand called Valkyrie. And spoiler alert, we've already tested it, reviewed it on our site, and it actually got a performance award for its, well, great performance. Now, the unboxing experience is kind of crazy and reveals to us a pretty interesting looking design. So we've got our radiator, nothing kind of out the ordinary there. We've got our 3 fans, which have these nice little connector pieces down the side to join them all together. There's actually a 3-pin ARGB header as well, so that implies there's some nice lighting to be kind of integrated here. We've then got this module with a 3.5-inch and apparently detachable LCD display, which we can configure, I presume, in software. And these fans look to be a really nice high-performance, pressure-optimized design that should, in theory, make things in the build perform pretty well. In terms of other bits and pieces, the box is pretty, like, unbelievable, really. And you get all the mounting hardware that you could possibly need included with a rather funky branded bag. And some very nicely organised screws, which actually have custom Valkyrie branding on. How cool. I'm quite looking forward to installing that later, and it's a little, whoa, what the is going on? It's a little bit different. What, have I broken, I think I've broken it. Comes with some RGB things as well. I think there's some more to unpack there a little bit later. Just realised I haven't yet spoken about the motherboard. Now, for this build, I've stuck with the ASUS TUF theme, tried to tie in the graphics card and the motherboard. I often try and do that in my builds because I think it just looks better, even if you may spend a little more money as a result. And this right here is the TUF Gaming B850 Plus Wi-Fi. You can see it looks rather nice, everything you'd expect from ASUS, the AM5 socket, nice PCI Gen 5 through M.2, little latch to remove the graphics card, and a pretty strong and solid I/O that includes things like a 2.5 gig Ethernet, nice high-speed USBs, and of course a Wi-Fi 7. This is very much a middle-of-the-road B850 board. It's not going to break the bank. It might cost you a little more than, say, a Gigabyte alternative. You do pay a little bit for the brand name of ASUS, but I think the feature set is pretty good, and the price represents broadly quite good value for money. Talking of value for money, that's where this comes in. It's a good segue into the case today, and this is the Phanteks Eclipse G400A. Now, believe it or not, Phanteks were one of the very first brands that I actually featured on the channel back in the day. Some of the first PC cases I ever bought were from Phanteks, and this builds on a product lineup that we're pretty familiar with. Their Eclipse line is a standard ATX tower, really, that supports standard components, standard sized motherboards, but they've leveled it up a little bit. They've brought it into the modern day, which is nice to see. And there's one major thing I like about this case, other than it looks pretty nice, and that's the airflow. You've got a full mesh panel on the front here, mesh down the side, mesh on top of the power supply, and you get not one, not two, not three, but four included 140mm fans. So you get three at the front, which are all the nice like interconnect type, so they're actually fairly premium, and then we get a further fan at the rear as well. You also get good support for radiators at the top, plenty of room for graphics cards, and a little RGB strip that's integrated, all of which is just a little value add that makes this thing seem, to me, like pretty remarkable value for money. The final component to talk about is hiding below the desk, and it's this, the power supply. I've gone for the Montech Century II Gold 850. It's an ATX 3.1 PCI Gen 5.1 power supply, I believe. It's Cybernetics Platinum, which is, in case you've not realised, 80 Plus is not cool anymore. Cybernetics is the one you want. And it comes with a 10-year warranty, apparently. Wow. Montech are another brand, really, that you couldn't be sleeping on at the moment. They've got some really good stuff. This is no exception. I've used the slightly higher wattage 1050 watt version in a build recently. We'll put that in the cards if we remember. And you can see it looks rather nice. Fully modular on the back. Nice little silver and black accents. Not that you're going to see it, because it'll be buried away in the PSU chamber of the case. So with that, I'm going to start putting this thing together, and start, as always, with the CPU, motherboard, RAM, and you guessed it, SSD. I'm going to start by putting the absolute rocket of a CPU in this build into the motherboard. I am, of course, talking about the 9800X3D, which, if you didn't realise, you can actually overclock now. You could never overclock the 7800, it just didn't work. You can indeed do that now, at least in a mainstream way, on the 9800. X3D. Once that's in, it's memory time. I'll be using the 2nd and 4th RAM DIMMs in this build. Handily, the little clips have already been unclipped, meaning all I've got to do is slide each DIMM into place. The M.2 drive is next. One thing ASUS could definitely improve on this board is making this top slot toolless. That's pretty standard on basically all the boards nowadays, so kind of actually a bit disappointing to see them not having done it here. However, the actual process of clipping the drive down is actually toolless. It's just the heatsink portion that isn't. With that being said, it's not a huge arduous task to get this back into place, so just find those screw threads, get it nice and tight. The only thing to watch out here though is that the black plastic brackets, which come included over our CPU, are not here. That's likely because I've used this board in a build before, so I do need to go ahead and check whether that's going to be a problem for the CPU cooler. Consulting the manual, and this might be one of the most premium feeling cooler manuals ever, what we need to do is just take off the black plastic fasteners and then actually install Valkyrie's own mounting system for the AM5 CPU. That is actually my preferred way as well, as it's going to give us 4 points to fix the cooler down to, rather than just the 2 notches on the stock plastic hardware. Go ahead and follow the instructions, basically put in new posts into each corner around the CPU, and the associated brackets will secure into place. The rest of the cooler is going to be done later. We're just doing a bit of prep at this stage to make life a little more simple. With the motherboard assembly then pretty much complete, I'm going to slide this into the case. Now this is an ATX case, this is an ATX board, and that means all the standoffs and stuff are going to be in the right locations, and that sliding the board into place should be a pretty easy and simple affair. Now there should be an accessory box for the case, indeed there is. It's labelled Phanteks Eclipse G408 accessory box, so you really can't miss it. As I say, you're going to get all the screws you need, including the motherboard screws. Now, there are 9 in total to do, so 3 at the top, 3 along the middle, and 3 along the bottom, just to secure this into place. If I don't drop them all on the floor between now and securing the motherboard down. Now, the motherboard is in. The next step is the cooler. And I think in this case, rather than taking off the whole top panel, you just take off this little mesh dust filter, and that gives you easy access to these radiator rails inside of the case. What I am going to do is I'm going to plug up some of the cables and stuff I need for the cooler now, just to make life a little bit easier. I'm also going to take off the screen as well for the time being. This is detachable, which means not only is the cooler going to be easier to install, but it's one less thing to worry about scratching or denting along the process. Just going to plug up that little singular cable, and then I'm going to hover the cooler over roughly where I'm going to install it, which for me is up here at the top of the case. The only challenge really is holding the cooler in while screwing it down can be a bit of a challenge. So you might want to put the case down flat for this stage, or grab a friend to help you. The problem is I haven't got any friends, so I'm flying solo, baby. Yeah, flying solo. Oh, yeah. Now, the good news is that once just literally 2 screws are in, that will hold the radiator temporarily. I wouldn't leave that like that permanently. To relieve the strain from your hands, you can go ahead and finish all the screws nice and easily with a bit less pressure. Then it's a case of adding the last couple of brackets for the cooler and installing the water block. Now, this CPU cooler does come with pre-applied thermal paste, but in order to benchmark it to see if we wanted to use it in today's build, I've already obviously had to install it, and as such, mine needs some fresh thermal paste applying. And with the cooler finally installed, it's power supply time. I'm going to go ahead and pop the Montech, what's it called? The Century II Gold in, and of course do all the modular cables. Now, this isn't going to be a cables and wiring guide. I've got loads of builds that cover that and a full tutorial, which you can check out in the cards now. I think it's got like a lot of views nowadays, which is great. I can't actually get into this bag of cables, but you can go ahead and check those out for the full power cable rundown and front panel cables. I'm going to get everything nicely wired up and then finish things off with the GPU. And then it's time for the GPU. Now, this right here, as I mentioned earlier, is from ASUS. It's their TUF Gaming RX 9070 XT, and this thing is a bit of a unit. Now, I'm actually going for, as you can probably tell, a slightly angular industrial aesthetic in this build, hence the cooler, which is quite blocky, the memory, the motherboard, and the GPU fits that theme perfectly. In fact, building gaming PCs around a certain theme is just one of my all-time favorite things to do. And I have to say, I'm liking the way this looks so far. Now, let me slide the GPU into place, and oh yes, this thing is looking perfect. Now, that's going to show me which PCI lanes need removing, and I'm happy to report it's the second and the third. That's quite standard for a normal ATX motherboard inside of a normal ATX case. So just the one screw here, followed by the second screw just below it, and then the graphics card will slide into place. Yeah, look at that. Couple of screws just to stop it from going anywhere. And the only thing about this card to note that's a little, I guess, kind of funky is it uses the old style 6+2 pin power cables. AMD are not really there yet in terms of PCI Gen 5. So what that means is that there are going to be quite a few cables and wire to manage off the back of the GPU. So give me a few moments to manage those together, and then it's time to boot this thing up. So this build looks amazing, but how does AMD's best current gen CPU and GPU pairing perform? Well, it's time to dive into the benchmarks and find out. Now, on your screen now is a summary of all the results we gathered with a mix of 1080, 1440p and 4K tested, and taking a closer look into selected titles shows some great results. Whether it be Cyberpunk 2077 at 4K high rasterization that pulls in not far from 80 frames per second on average, Marvel's Rivals at 4K high which clocks in over 90 frames per second all told, or even Fortnite at 1080p competitive settings which yields over 380 frames per second. This is a build that delivers sensational gaming performance, and especially at those low resolutions, you'll see a massive benefit benefit from that X3D CPU paired up with AMD's hugely popular and for good reason 9070 XT. What do you guys think of this build? Let me know in the comments down below. Get subscribed if you're not already. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.